Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we will try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion with respect to the crisis in Manipur and why it is posing as one of the greatest security challenges to India. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the increasing number of fire incidents in the hospitals around the country, the causes and the way forward. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles with special reference to UPSC Prelims 2025 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. So coming to the very first article, the article is what Manipur needs. See, since 2023, what we are witnessing is that Manipur has been ravaged with ethnic conflicts. And it is for this reason that we have this particular column, which is written by Mr. Prakash Singh, a very famous former IPS officer, who says that Manipur is a classic example of how not to deal with internal security problem. And he also gives some of the ways which the government needs to adopt. Now, in this particular article, we'll try to focus upon the causes which are underlying the crisis, what government measures have been taken, and what should be the way forward. Now, this is with respect to GS3 internal security. Now, if you look at the northeastern part of the country in particular, what you will see is that this region is strategically located, first of all, because it shares a land boundary with different countries. And in this context, what we're talking about right now is Myanmar, right? So Myanmar, we have 4 states in India, that is Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, which share a land boundary of almost 1600 kilometers. And in specific, since we are talking about Manipur, Manipur shares a land boundary of almost 400 kilometers with Myanmar, right? That is the first thing. Second thing, what you need to understand is the whole region, it is predominantly tribal. Now, for example, we have the state of Arunachal Pradesh, where we have specific tribal groups. Then we have got Nagaland. So we have Nagas over here. So Nagas not only live in Nagaland, but they also live in the other states, adjoining states. Then we have Manipur. So we have communities like Meiteis, we have communities like Kukis, right? Then we have the state of Mizoram, where you have Mizos. Now, what you need to understand is that it's not just these tribal communities who are interrelated to each other. We also have some of these tribal communities in Myanmar who are culturally related to the tribal communities in India. For example, we have a particular tribal community, that is Zo community. Now, that is linked to the Kukis in India. Now, Zo primarily they live in Myanmar, right? So that is the second point. Third point, what you need to understand is that there has been prolonged internal security challenges with respect to almost all the states in the Northeast, right? Primarily because that they basically want to secure autonomy. They want to secure independence, right? So if you look into the editorial, the primary reasons which the author has tried to give is first, the ethnic conflicts. That is the conflicts taking place among different tribal groups. Second is the tribal insurgency. That is to secure the autonomy and independence. Third is drug trafficking. Now, what it means is that we have the illegal trade of drug which is being carried out, right, in this particular region. We'll look into it. Next is infiltration from Myanmar. That is, we have some of the tribal groups and some of the anti-social elements who are infiltrating from Myanmar to India and causing chaos, right? So this is the overall outlook. Now, if you look at the key factors which are contributing to the crisis, the first is ethnic tensions, as we just talked about. That this region, it is dominated by different tribal groups. So if you look at the state of Manipur in particular, what you'll see is that primarily we have got 2 tribal groups which are at sort of loggerheads with each other. So we have got first the Meiteis, who are predominantly Hindus and who live in the Imphal Valley, and they constitute around 53% of the total population of the state. Then we have got the Nagas and the Kukis, which primarily live in the hill areas. Now, again, they contribute to around 40% of the population. Now, there has been a sort of not so good relation between these 2 communities. Next is conflict drivers. What are the conflict drivers? First is, see, Meiteis, they are relatively more developed as compared to the Kukis. But they have demanded the scheduled tribe status, right? So that has fueled resentment among the other communities, and that has led to these conflicts taking place. Next is, there have been historical grievances. historical grievances with respect to the land rights, with respect to the resource sharing, right? So there the condition is very acrimonious. Next is communal clashes, primarily between Meiteis and Kukis. Next, if we talk about, the reason is insurgency. Again, what we are trying to say is that many insurgent groups have come up and they are basically demanding independence. They are demanding autonomy, right? So for example, we have got the Meitei groups, right? We have the United Nation Liberation Front, or we have got the People Liberation Army. Similarly, we have got the Kuki groups, for example, the Kuki National Organization or the United Kuki Liberation Front. Then we have got the Naga groups, for example, the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, that is Isak Movia, right? So again, we have got different insurgent groups and they are sometimes warring with each other. And again, obviously, they are against the state also. Next is the objective of these armed groups is to establish greater autonomy. And in some circumstances, they're also demanding complete independence. Next is that they also are focusing upon the protection of the ethnic identity, right? They don't want any sort of interference from outside. They want to protect the historical legacy, right? Next point is, the next factor is the geopolitical vulnerabilities. As I just talked about, that we have these states who are sharing direct land border with Myanmar. So we have geopolitical angle which is also involved. So the first is that the border which these states share with Myanmar, that is porous, right? Now what it leads to is that there is continuous passage of the insurgents and illegal trade. See, what you need to understand is that the government of India has been trying its best to make, through the counter insurgency operation, make sure that no insurgent group is there in these states. But what these insurgent groups have been doing is that they have been making camps in Myanmar, right? So that is a major security challenge for India. Next is that there has been too much of narcotics and arms smuggling, right? Again, if you look at this particular area, we have got the country of Myanmar. Over here, we have got the region of Golden Triangle, which is a hub of drug production, right? Opium trade, right? And through that, this passage, it comes into India illegally. And then obviously it affects the people, right? So we have got the Golden Triangle. Now, once you have got the illegal arms and drug trafficking which taking place, that obviously aggravates the violence, right? So you have got extortion which takes place. We have got trafficking which takes place. Next is the economic marginalization. See, what you need to understand is, if you look at the northeastern region generally, you will see that it is distanced from the mainland. And because of that, it has suffered economically, right? The kind of economic development we have witnessed in the other parts of the country, that is primarily the mainland, has not been witnessed in the northeastern region, right? And again, this has led to underdevelopment in the infrastructure. It has led to limited job opportunities. Now, again, understand that if you have youths who are not getting proper employment opportunities, obviously they'll turn to these groups, insurgent groups, because these insurgent groups are providing them the financial value, right? They're giving them the money, right? So therefore, they are naturally inclined to join these groups. Next is the weak governance. See, what we have seen is that since this region is dominated by tribals, the state machinery is quite weak. Because on one hand, you have the constitutionally directed mandate to provide the autonomy, in these states. So therefore, what happens is that the state machinery is it's actually weak. It's unable to implement its policies. So the overall structure is weak governance. And many a times what happens is that it leads to delayed conflict resolution. That is conflict resolution among different parties, be it the insurgent groups, be it the state or the insurgent groups. Next is that there is too much of corruption which is there. Next, there is inefficiency once we talk about the implementation of government policies. Next, this point becomes important because what we have seen is that there have been accusation of bias against the government. So there have been a section of society which is saying that the government is biased for a particular community, right? Next is the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the human rights concern. See, understand that the very objective of the AFSPA is to basically curb the insurgents, right? The activity carried out by the insurgents. But it has been, many a times it has been seen that the powers which are given to the armed forces under this particular act, they have been misused, right? So there have been criticism with respect to human rights violations which have taken place in this particular area, right? So again, these are primarily the causes which are responsible for the overall state of affairs in Manipur and in general the whole Northeast. Now, what measures have been taken by the government? See, the first is that government has focused upon establishing the peace agreements, right? For example, that government came up with a framework agreement with National Socialist Council of Nagaland, right? Isak Movia, right? Next, what the government has done is that it has come into the suspension of operation agreements, right? So through these agreements, the armed groups, the insurgent groups, they are made to suspend their activities, right? Next is that there have been different development initiatives. So if you know that we have one of the very important policies, that is Act East policy. Now through this, the government is trying to integrate, enhance the connectivity and the infrastructure in the overall Southeast Asia region. Now you need to tell me the name of the project which is being implemented by India in Myanmar, which emphasizes on the connectivity. Do mention in the comment section. Now, next is government has been carrying out different counter-insurgency operations with the help of different armed forces, right? So we have a deployment of specialized forces. For example, we have got the CRPF, we have got the Assam Rifles. Next is enhanced border management and fencing. Recently, just before a few days, even Honorable Home Minister said that we are focusing upon enhancing, making sure that the whole fencing is made more robust, right? Next is that there have been voices which are saying that AFSPA will be reviewed in some areas. So if the government thinks that there is peace which is established in some areas, so they'll basically try to, end AFSPA over there. So gradual removal of AFSPA is also being sought. Next is rehabilitation program. This is very important. See, there have been programs which focus upon surrender cum rehabilitation. That is, if you have insurgent groups, if they basically surrender, so they are then provided with adequate job opportunities, a fixed financial package. So that is the kind of policies which make these insurgents to come back and then join the society and reintegrate. Now, in the editorial, there have been certain criticisms with respect to the government measures. So what Mr. Prakash Singh says that we have a heavy reliance on these central armed police forces. That is, we are having a very iron fist approach and we are having too much of reliance on AFSPA. Next is that there is complete absence of confidence building measures. So what the author is trying to say is that instead of focusing upon having the confidence building measures, we are focusing upon these armed forces, right? So it's a very tough approach. Then political outreach has been missing. One of the important points which the author has said is that especially from the side of the union government, the political outreach has not been there. Next, what are the challenges in basically resolving the crisis? So the first, as I told you, that we have deep-rooted ethnic divisions. We have got multiple ethnicities who are involved, multiple ethnic groups with their own agenda, right? So it is very difficult to reach a consensus, right? Next is multiplicity of insurgent groups, as I just said. So once you have got different insurgent groups, some of them fighting against each other, almost all fighting against the state. So that becomes a very complex situation. Next is cross-border dynamics. It's not just about the tribals who are living in the country. It's also about the tribals who are there in Myanmar. And not only the tribals, but the anti-social elements, the insurgents who are having camps in Myanmar, right? Next is delayed justice. One of the most important grievance which the people of Manipur have is that, if a particular activity, anti-social activity took place, let's say, murder took place or extortion took place, the government was very slow to take actions, right? Proper actions were not taken. So that is one of the grievance. That is the kind of resentment which people have. Next is there are coordination issues. Now this becomes very important. Coordination issues between the central government, the state government, and including the local authorities, right? So the coordination issues are missing. Then we have what should be the way forward. See, the very first point is that we have to focus upon dialogue and reconciliation. Very important point. So we need to reconcile the differences. We need to have a proper dialogue among different stakeholders, right? So we need to engage all the stakeholders, be it the insurgent groups, be it the state, be it the civil society, be it the NGOs, whatever, right? Be it the leaders of the tribes, they need to be involved. And we need to focus upon the confidence building measures. This is something which is very important, because it is only the way through which we can basically resolve the ethnic grievances. That is the grievances which different ethnic groups have. Next is economic empowerment. See, this is a very important, because you need to empower people economically. You need to give them adequate opportunities, right? So that they can have their own livelihoods. They can focus upon their livelihoods, right? So we need to boost the infrastructure. We need to focus upon giving them education opportunities and different employment opportunities through, let's say, credit disbursal. Let's say some of the incentives in the form of, establishing the manufacturing base in the Northeast, right? Greater investments are needed. For example, in local industries, for example, in handicrafts. So if you know that we have the state of Meghalaya, which is very famous for the production of pineapples, right? So similarly, you have the other states also. So they basically can work upon that product in which it specializes. Next is, we need to focus upon improved governance. This is very important. See, what we are trying to say is that there needs to be the establishment, institutionalization of transparent and inclusive governance. What we mean to say is that you need to include different groups. You need to have a stakeholder approach, right? Inclusive approach. It cannot be like you have the government who's basically taking decisions on its own unilaterally. That cannot happen, right? And we need to strengthen the local bodies. See, again, for years we have emphasized upon the importance of local bodies, right? For India in general, but especially in these region, in the northeastern part of the country, where we have a dominance of tribal groups, we basically need to strengthen the local bodies more, right? So that they can basically make their development, do their development on their own course, right? Strengthening the border security, very important. So there has to be adequate funds given by Ministry of Home Affairs, right, or the state government to strengthen, to modernize the border infrastructure and deploy advanced surveillance mechanisms, right, cameras, thermal cameras, right, and strengthen cooperation with Myanmar. Now, this is very important. We need to talk in a very straight manner, very clear manner that yes, who all, the insurgent groups who have base in Myanmar, they need to be tackled effectively by the Myanmaris, right. Next is human rights sensitivity. So what we are trying to say is that there has to be a gradual withdrawal of AFSPA, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, right? Because again, it has fueled a lot of resentment among the people, discontent among the people. Human rights sensitive approach. So even including the armed forces, they need to be, following a human rights sensitive approach. Then cultural integration. See, what we need to focus, since we already know that the region comprises of several ethnic groups, several tribal groups, there has to be focus upon the cultural and educational exchanges, right? So as to foster, a brotherhood among people. Then we need to celebrate the diversity. It should not be a point of contention. It should not be a point of, a debate, right? Diversity is something which is good for the nation as a whole. And in states like, Manipur, where you have a lot of tribal groups, that should be celebrated. Next, what the editorial says is that we need to focus upon, the first point is Prime Minister's role, right? So what Mr. Prakash Singh says, that Prime Minister, as soon as possible, he's already very late, according to the author, so he should visit Manipur so that people can basically have trust in his leadership and the commitment he has for the nation, right? Next is, there has to be a very robust disarmament drive. Again, what we are trying to say, what the author is trying to say is that the district administration, the state machinery needs to collect all the unlicensed weapons which people have, right? All the prohibited arms, right? So as to make sure that there is peace in the region. Next is, peace committees need to be established at the district level, at the state level, so that they can coordinate among themselves and reach to a proper consensus. Then we have got WAM approach. That is winning hearts and minds of the people, right? So it's not just about the guns, right? It's not about the kind of philosophy which Mao Zedong said, the power flows through the barrel of the gun. No. It is about winning the hearts and minds of the people. You need to give them the opportunity. You need to listen to them, right? And then a proper consensus has to be reached. So what we are trying to say is, yes, the situation in Manipur is obviously very fragile. It has ravaged the whole state. But again, through these measures, what we can ensure is, we can ensure a proper stakeholder approach. We can make sure that we have a proper governance structure. We can make sure that there is proper focus upon the cultural integration. We should also focus upon the WAM approach, that is winning hearts and minds of the people. In this way, we can make sure that we have a sustainable process in Manipur and we have an inclusive sort of environment in Manipur, right? So that is it, what you need to focus with respect to this particular article. Now, let's have a mains practice question. The question says, The internal security crisis in Manipur exemplifies the complexities of addressing ethnic conflicts, insurgency, and cross-border challenges in a sensitive border state. Critically analyze the factors contributing to the crisis and evaluate the measures taken by the government. Suggest a comprehensive strategy to restore peace and normalcy in the state. Do write a particular answer on this question. That's it. So coming to the second topic, it is the hospital fires in India. Now, recently, what we witnessed was that a massive fire broke in Tamil Nadu, in Dindigul, which led to the loss of lives of 6 people. Now, why this topic becomes important is that we have been hearing this very frequently. For example, just before a month, we also had a very serious incident in Jhansi, Maharani Rani Lakshmi Bai Hospital, where so many infants died. Similarly, just before a few months, we also had an incident in Vivek Vihar in Delhi, right? Now, this points towards the loopholes which are present in the healthcare delivery, right, in the hospitals. So, this is a very serious issue. Now, this is a part of GS2, social sector, health. Now, hospital fires in the country, they are a very serious public safety concern. And this is primarily because of the serious gaps which are there in the overall infrastructure, the health infrastructure, and the non-following of the safety protocols, which ultimately what it leads to is the loss of lives of people and loss of property. Now, if you look at the recent major fire incidents, which I just talked about, so we had one of the incidents in Rajkot and Ahmedabad during the COVID-19 period, where many people died, primarily because of the use of inflammable materials, primarily because of the short circuit. Next, we had a very serious fire which took place in a hospital in Vivek Vihar, where many infants died, right? Now, this took place in June 2024. Then we had a very recent incident in Jhansi. So, we had Maharani Rani Lakshmi Bai Medical College, Jhansi, where again, so many infants died. Now, this is a very serious concern. See, again, people are going to the hospitals to secure better care. But if these incidents happen, obviously, it puts a question mark on the overall healthcare delivery system in the country. Now, what are the common causes of hospital fire accidents? The very first is the electrical short circuits. So, in most of the cases, one of the reasons which has been specified the most is the short circuits. Now, again, why? Primarily because in the hospitals, the circuits are overloaded because you have huge medical equipments and they consume a lot of power. Sometimes the heating takes place and then short circuit takes place. Next is the poor maintenance of the overall wiring system in the hospitals, right? So there is no effective maintenance of these systems. Next is lack of fire safety equipments. So again, what we are saying is that the procedure with respect to the fire safety protocols is not being effectively carried out. So there is complete absence in many hospitals with respect to the fire extinguishers, with respect to the smoke detectors, with respect to you have in equipments which are actually non-functional, right? So that is a very serious concern. Also, if you look at this particular infographic, what you'll see is the hospital fire safety compliance in Tamil Nadu. What it says that there is no fire safety plan in almost 2,000 hospitals in Tamil Nadu. Then there is no license in almost 1,400 hospitals. Then there is no ramp in almost 1,270 hospitals. Now, this is a very serious state of affairs. Now, next is the reason is the flammable materials. So what we are trying to say is that there is, a lot of, materials which are used in the hospitals. For example, be it the chemicals, be it the sanitizers, be it the cotton or anything, the bed sheets. Now, all these are inflammable. Again, there is improper storage and that basically aggravates the fire. Next is building code violations. So we already have established codes with respect to the building, the construction of building in the country, but that is not being followed, right? So there is non-compliance with respect to the fire safety standards. Then lack of fire exits or blocked routes, right? So this again, if you don't have proper passage through which the patients or the other people who are in the hospital can come out, obviously it would lead to, people would gather at a particular place, smoke would gather up, and ultimately it would lead to the demise of people. Next is human negligence. See, the staff we have in the hospitals, they don't have a proper training with respect to the safety, the fire protocols, right? So that is one of the reasons. There is lack of training. Fire safety protocols are not followed. Delayed response to alarms, right? So in some cases, there are no alarms. And wherever you have alarms, you have delayed response. Next is overcrowding. This is one of the important reasons. The kind of healthcare delivery we have in the country, what we're trying to say is that we have very few hospitals, and most of these hospitals are overcrowded, especially when we talk about the public healthcare facilities, right? So again, when there is limited infrastructure capacity, it basically burdens the overall system, right? And it can lead to a situation where you have got heated medical equipments, right? Again, they're working beyond their capacity, and then it can lead to sort of fires. Then we have situations where you have overcrowded intensive care units, even the wards, right? Now, what is the regulatory framework with respect to the fire safety in the hospitals? The very first is the National Building Code. Now, this applies to all the buildings, but in particular, when we talk about the hospital, it provides a detailed guidelines for the fire prevention and safety measures, right? So these guidelines have to be followed once you are constructing these buildings. Next, we have the state-specific fire safety plans. So every state, it has a fire department, and then it has some of the requisites which are to be followed by different buildings, right? Once you're constructing a building, or once you are having a proper enterprise, or once you're making a hospital, you have to follow those guidelines. So you need to take the fire no objection certificate from the local fire departments, and annual audit also take place, right? Then we have got the Electricity Act of 2003. Now this emphasizes upon the safe installation of the wiring, the equipments in the overall building, right? Next is the Environment Protection Act. Now this basically focuses upon the management of hazardous chemicals, be it the chemicals which are used in the hospital. So they need to be properly managed. Next is Clinical Establishment Registration and Regulation Act of 2010. Now this ensures whether the compliance with respect to the other guidelines is there or not, right? So it is basically an overarching framework which tries to make sure that whether the compliance is being taken care of or not. Now, what should be the way forward with respect to these incidents? First is strict compliance with fire safety norms. So what we are trying to focus is that the National Building Code or the state fire safety guidelines, they need to be adhered to, right? They need to be followed, right? Next is regular fire audits. See, again, the issue is that there is corruption involved, right? So in many of the cases, what you see is that no inspection takes place, and approvals are given. So there has to be a third party verification mechanism, third party independent inspection, right? So that if there are loopholes, they can be rectified. Ultimately, it is about the life of the people, right? So that cannot be put at stake. Next is there has to be proper staff training. So we need to focus upon having regular drills, right? And those drills, with the help of those drills, what we can make sure that people, the staff, they are properly prepared to manage if such a condition occurs. Then we have got fireproof design. Again, what we are trying to say is that there has to be the usage of non-flammable materials in the overall hospital, right? Proper ventilation has to be there. Many a times, the reason for the death of people is the smoke, right? So the smoke, there has to be a proper escape route for the smoke, right? With proper ventilation. Then we have to focus upon electrical system updates. That is, there has to be regular maintenance, and there has to be usage of miniature circuit breakers, MCBs, right? Miniature circuit breakers. So that whenever you have certain ups and downs in the electrical flow, that circuit breakers can basically stop the flow of current. Next is we need to focus upon dedicated fire safety teams. So we need to basically give adequate training and come up with specialized personnel. Then so that they are in a better condition to manage the fire hazards. Next is we need to integrate technology. Now this is very important, that we can have automatic fire detection systems, AFDs, right? So that they can give alarm, and then the situation can be effectively controlled. Then we need to have suppression systems in place which can suppress the fire if it takes place. Next is patient safety measures. Again, we have certain patients who are basically immobile, who are in intensive care units, who are on the oxygen support, right? So they need to be basically taken out on a priority basis, right? In mobile patients. Then public-private collaboration has to be there, right? So it's not just the responsibility of the government. So we can have PPP models, which can basically focus upon upgrading the overall infrastructure of these hospitals. Next is proper policy reforms have to take place. That is, we need to impose strict penalties for those who are basically non-compliant, those hospitals who are non-compliant, and we need to incentivize those hospitals who are actually investing a lot in these fire safety mechanisms. Now, again, what we are trying to say is that, see, people go to hospital to seek care, right? But if these incidents happen, obviously it's a blot on the overall healthcare delivery of the country. So therefore, we need to make effective plans. We need to follow the guidelines which are there in the place. We need to, just end the corruption which is there, the nexus which is there in the system, and we need to basically integrate the technology so that these incidents do not happen, and we can save the life and property, right? So that is it. What you need to know with respect to this particular article. Now, let's have a mains practice question. The question says, the increasing incidence of fire accidents in the hospitals across India highlights serious lapse in the safety regulations and enforcement. Examine the underlying causes of such incidents and their implications on public health and safety. Suggest measures to improve the fire safety standards in healthcare facilities. Do write a particular answer on this question. So coming to the simplified section, we have the first article which talks about the mineral diplomacy. Now, see, let's go through the gist of the article first. Now, what the article is trying to say is that as we are basically on the path of Industrial Revolution 4.0, where you have most of the industries which are based on the electronics, we have a requirement of critical minerals, right? Be it semiconductors, right? Usage of semiconductors, be it the electric vehicles, be it the mobiles, be it any electronic equipment, it has the requirement of critical minerals. But what we see when we talk about the overall supply chain of these critical minerals, what we see is that we have countries like China, right? Primarily China, who are basically following a very aggressive stance. That is, they are focusing upon aggressive production within their country, and they're also going with aggressive partnerships with different countries around the world who have basically these critical minerals with them, the ores of critical minerals. Now, again, in this particular article, the author has tried to give suggestions and said that India suggestions in the end, and then what the government is trying to do is right now that it is coming up with partnerships with different countries, mineral producing countries, and secondly, what it is trying to do is that it is focusing upon developing the intergovernmental agreements with different international organizations. Now, again, the writer has also given some suggestions. For example, we need to basically make a particular division in the External Affairs Ministry, right? And we need to focus upon enhancing the overall partnerships with different countries and enhancing the overall supply chain mechanism of these critical minerals. That is the overall gist. Now, what the article says is that as India seeks to expand its manufacturing and technological capability of critical minerals, it will become vital to fulfill this ambition. However, India is a major critical mineral importer, and primarily it imports from countries like China, right? Now, this is a cause which is strategic. It's a strategic concern, right, for India. And therefore, we also had the defense minister who said that while the scramble for the resources of economic reasons has had a long history, their weaponization by some nations for strategic reasons is comparatively new phenomena, basically talking about the Chinese stance, right? Now, India's mineral security challenge, we need to address that, and we need to reduce our vulnerability. Now, New Delhi has basically started to come up with different partnerships. Now, basically, we are trying to follow two pillars. First is developing the international engagements with mineral producing countries. Second is establishing strategic partnerships with intergovernmental organizations. Now, the first pillar, what it does is, it is trying to focus upon building the partnerships, bilateral ties with mineral resource countries, right? So you have some of the countries like Argentina, like Central Asian countries who are endowed with rich critical mineral sources. So we are trying to have bilateral relations with them, right? Such as Australia, Argentina, United States, Russia, Kazakhstan, to secure the supply of lithium and cobalt. Very important minerals, especially when we talk about the manufacturing of electric vehicles, right? To facilitate this vision, post 2019, India established the Khanij Bidesh India Limited, that is Kabul, right? A joint venture company which basically has a mandate to ensure a consistent supply of critical and strategic minerals to the Indian domestic market, right? The objective is to achieve mineral security by securing agreements and acquisitions through government to government, government to business, and business to business routes, different routes. Next is that in March 2022, now in this article, this information can be very good once you're writing your mains answer, right? So you can come up with, once you're writing an answer with respect to the critical minerals, you can come up with these measures which are taken by the government, right? So that is the importance of such articles. Kabul signed a memorandum of understanding with Australia for critical mineral investment partnership, identifying 2 lithium and 3 cobalt projects. Then we also had relations with Latin America's lithium triangle. We look what lithium triangle is all about, which constitutes Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, right? also attracted India's attention. So in January 2024, India signed a $24 million lithium exploration pact with state-owned enterprise in Argentina for 5 lithium brine blocks, right, where you basically find the lithium, right. Kabul is also actively working to secure mineral supplies by buying of assets from Bolivia and Chile. Now again, it's not just that we have the state-owned enterprises, we also have private sector which is actively engaging. India's private sector has also benefited. We have Altmine Private Limited, which signed an agreement with YLB, Bolivia's national company, to secure the raw material supplies chain of lithium and batteries. Then Central Asia has also caught India's attention. Recently, India and Kazakhstan formed a joint venture, that is IREUK Titanium Limited. Right, so titanium is also one of the very important critical minerals. Titanium slag in India, to produce titanium slag. This was one of the India's first joint ventures with the Central Asian republics. Now this basically aligns with the kind of New Delhi's proposals to establish the India Central Asia Rare Earth Forum, right, to leverage the region's rich resources. Now again, let's focus upon this. It can be very important. So we have the lithium triangle. So we have got 3 countries in South America, that is the Bolivia, Chile and Argentina. In this region, what you see, that is the region which encompasses these 3 countries, the triangle, that has a huge lithium sources, right? So this is obviously one of the very strategic interest for the country. Now, if you look at the critical minerals which are there in the Central Asian region, right? So we have got the country of Kazakhstan. So it has fluorine, then it has lithium, silicon, rare earth elements. Then we got countries like Uzbekistan, similarly Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. All these countries of the Central Asian region, they're endowed with rich critical minerals, right? See, we also have the countries of Caucasus, that is Georgia, Azerbaijan and Armenia. Then we have got the countries like Ukraine, right? So again, we need to come up with partnerships with these countries so that we can secure the supply of these critical elements, right? Now, these are critical for battery technology, solar panels, wind turbines, battery, solar and wind technology, other energy uses. Again, see, understand, all these areas, all these avenues are the ones where India is actively focusing, right? So this naturally becomes very important. Now, what the next aspect of the article is that the second pillar of mineral diplomacy is the international agreements. So again, what we are trying to focus is we are coming with multilateral initiatives. So if you know that we also have the Quad, right? So one of the pillars of Quad is to secure the mineral supplies. Then we have got the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, IPF. Then we have got the Mineral Security Partnership. Very important, we'll study about it. Then we have got the G7 for the cooperation in the critical minerals. Now again, the overall objective is the aim is to align India with global best practices in the critical mineral sector in 3 segments. Now, what are the 3 segments? We have got the upstream, midstream and downstream. Primarily, these segments, they involve the extraction of the mineral, the processing and the final conversion, right? So that is what the kind of stages are. Additionally, they also facilitate knowledge sharing and capacity building, which is important for coordinating with international partners such as United States or European Union, South Korea or Australia. Then see, again, we are also focusing upon the technology transfer. So these are developed countries. For example, we have US, South Korea. So we can basically source that technology with respect to the critical minerals in India. Additionally, they also facilitate knowledge sharing and capacity building, right? So we already done that. Now again, to further the collaboration with the Western partners, India's Ministry of Mines has signed an MOU with the International Energy Agency. Do read about it, right? To strengthen the cooperation on critical minerals. Now, can you just tell me the report, a very important report which is published by the International Energy Agency? Do write in the comment section, right? Now, this is basically helping India to streamline its policies, the regulations, investment strategies in the critical mineral sector and align them with the best global practices. Now, what are the missing pieces? What are the areas where the Indian government should basically do something? So India's attempt at mineral diplomacy has led to many positive outcomes, but still lacks 3 essential ingredients for its international diplomatic engagement. These are a lack of private sector participation. As I've always said, you cannot really, expect that the government does everything. You need to basically also involve the private players, right? Because they have the technical expertise. They have got the adequate consulting abilities, right? So they need to be included. Weak diplomatic capacity. The kind of diplomatic capacity which China has, India is not, even close to that. So we need to enhance the diplomatic capacity. Then insufficient sustainable partnerships. So again, we need to focus upon making sustainable partnerships. Also, India's private sector has largely been missing from the equation. The absence of critical mineral supply chain strategy and a clear roadmap are the two primary variables responsible for lack of policy clarity. We need to come up with clear policy designs, right? India needs to formulate a comprehensive approach for de-risking, right? Then it has to enhance. See, again, if you will focus upon de-risking the overall sector, only then the private sector would come, right? Because the risk-bearing capacity of the private sector is not equivalent to that of the government, right? Then we have an important step to have a supply chain strategy based on India's growth prospects and national security priorities. Second, India must strengthen its mineral diplomacy engagement, having a dedicated mineral diplomacy division. Again, these are the points, these are the suggestions which you can incorporate in your answers, right? So most of the times what happens is that we worry about this, that where to source the way forward, more creative way forwards. So this is the kind of information which you get from the articles, and that can be incorporated in your answers, right? So similar to the new and emerging strategic technology, we have a particular, this division was made, NEST division, right? So we also need to focus on coming up with a new division which is focused upon the minerals, and a special position for the mineral diplomacy in selected diplomatic missions. So in some countries like Argentina or Australia, we can have specific officers who are basically expert in this particular field and who can basically have diplomatic conversations with the counterparts. Third, India's goal towards mineral security necessitates that New Delhi forge strategic, sustainable and trusted partnerships with bilateral partners and multilateral forums. So we have different countries. For example, we have got European Union, South Korea and Quad members. So they basically need to come up, India needs to come up with different strategic partnership with these countries for proper technology transfer, for making sure that there is adequate transfer of these critical minerals. It's critical for India's mineral security due to its domestic capabilities, diplomatic network and technological know-how. This is the kind of article we had. Now let's study about mineral security partnership, very important. So this is a PIB screenshot, very important. I'll read it. It says, India has become the 14th member of the Mineral Security Partnership in June 2023. The other member countries are US, Australia, Canada, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Norway, Republic of Korea, Sweden, UK and European Commission. The MSP, now this is important, Mineral Security Partnership seeks to enhance the critical mineral supply chains to support the economic prosperity and climate objectives. So it's not just about the economic angle. We are also focusing upon the climate aspect also. It seeks to ensure that critical minerals are produced, processed and recycled by catalyzing investments from governments, private sector across the full value chain. So this can be probably asked in prelims. Now, let's study Kabel, important. So we have Khanij Bidesh India Limited, Kabel. It's a joint venture company, remember, right? Among the three government enterprises. So we have got NALCO, we have got National Aluminium Company, we have got Hindustan Copper Limited, we have got the Mineral Exploration and Consultancy Limited in the ratio of 40:30:30 under the aegis of Ministry of Mines to ensure supply side assurance of critical and strategic minerals and mineral security of the nation. Kabel was incorporated in this. Mandate of the Kabel is to identify, explore, acquire, develop, mine, process, procure strategic minerals outside India for supplying primarily to India to meet the domestic requirements due to non or meager availability, small availability in the country, and giving a big push to make in India. So that is a kind of objective of Kabel is. It can be important for the prelims. That is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next article, it is with respect to the concept of one candidate, multiple constituencies. See, the overall gist of the article is that we have been since so many days focusing upon the simultaneous elections, right? One nation, one election. But why we are not focusing upon one aspect, that is one candidate, multiple constituencies. That is, we have a situation in the country where a candidate is allowed to contest the elections from 2 seats, right? Previously, there were no restrictions, but since 96, a candidate can basically contest elections on 2 seats. Now, again, what happens is that if the candidate wins from 1 seat, then the other seat has to basically be vacant. Now, again, once it's vacant, you have to conduct the by-elections. Now, once the by-election takes place, obviously, it is something which basically hurts the public exchequer. Ultimately, it is a public money which is used for that. So this is a kind of overall argument. The writers of the column, they are basically saying that we need to basically do away with this practice, and there are certain recommendations also, law commission recommendations, or in fact the other recommendations which are mentioned in this particular article. That is the overall gist. Now, ever since that we have been talking about the one nation one election, which was, there was also a committee which was headed by former president of India, Ramnath Kovind. It recommended simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. We have another important issue where we haven't focused, and that is one candidate contesting from multiple constituencies. Now, the Constitution of India provides for a regular elections, right? We all know that, to the legislative assembly and the lower house of the parliament, that is the Lok Sabha. And we have got the body, very important body, that is Election Commission of India, has been empowered. And in addition to the Election Commission of India, we also have the Parliament, which is empowered to regulate the manner of conducting the elections, right? So we know that the Election Commission of India has plenary powers with respect to the conduct of elections, but Parliament is also authorized to make laws with respect to the same, right? Therefore, we have people contesting from multiple constituencies has been dealt with a particular law, and that is Representation of People's Act of 1951, a very important act which is also mentioned in your syllabus of GS2, right? So under the act, there was no limit on the number of constituencies a candidate could contest until 1996. Then what it resulted to was that people used to contest from multiple constituencies, sometimes more than two, right? And then they had to vacate all but one seat in accordance to section 70 of this particular act. Now, this necessitated by-elections, obviously. So if you have got vacant seats, you'll have to conduct the by-elections. Now, Parliament amended this act in 1996 to limit the number of constituencies that a candidate can contest from to two, right? So right now, a candidate can contest from only two seats, right? The amendment intended to discourage one candidate from contesting from multiple constituencies. Despite these, the practice has continued. So you must know that we had in 2014 also Prime Minister, including the Prime Minister, who contested from two seats, right? Despite this, the practice has continued. The number are even more frequent in state legislative assembly elections, leading to the frequent by-elections, right? Again, what we are saying is that because of this, the whole process, we are in a continuous mode of elections. And because of that, the development suffers, right? So that is one aspect. The second is that ultimately the kind of money we are using in the by-elections, that is also public money, right? There were 44 by-elections for state assemblies in November 2024, right? So in just a month, you had 44 by-elections due to resignation of the sitting legislatures. Frequent by-elections due to candidates winning from multiple constituencies pose several challenges. Now, what are the challenges? They add to the taxpayer cost. The administrative cost of the Lok Sabha is borne out by the central government and the legislative assemblies by the state government. In 2014, the number, the expenditure has been provided here. It amounted to 3,870 crores, adjusted for 6% annual inflation. The 2024 general election is put at a cost of 6,931 crores, almost 7,000 crores. That is almost 13 crores per seat. If 10 politicians win from two constituencies, the extra cost of holding a by-election would be around 130 crores, right? Very big amount. While this is relatively small when compared to the overall election spending, real issue lies in the massive expenditure by the political parties. So whenever we are focusing upon the expenditure incurred in the election process, we generally think about the expenditure being done by the government. But what we fail to acknowledge is the mammoth expenditure which is being incurred by the political parties, and most of it is black money, right? So it was estimated to be around 1,35,000 crores for the recent general elections, or about 250 crores per constituency, right? According to the estimates by Center for Media Studies. Now, this burden ultimately falls on the end person, that is the public, right? And much of the funding is through the black money, which undermines the overall financial transparency. And obviously, there is no accountability also, right? Second, the by-election necessitated by the vacation of the seats of the winning candidate tends to favor the ruling party. Now, this is but obvious. So if you basically have a person who is vacating the seats, and if he has has won from the other seat, definitely there is a natural unconscious bias with respect to that person's political party, right? So and that result into the sort of in favor of the ruling party. This is borne out by the by-election trends around the country. This emanates from the fact that the ruling party can mobilize resources, provide resources to the party workers, and again this creates the scene of non-level playing, right? And this is skewed against the opposition, and which has negative implications for the parliamentary democracy, right? In a parliamentary democracy, opposition holds quite a good importance, right? It is very important that you have a strong opposition, otherwise you'll basically lose the values of democracy, right? Third, the financial burden of organizing the by-election disproportionately falls on the already defeated candidate and their party. Fourth, saying that democracy is a government of the people, for the people, and by the people suggests that elections should serve the people's need, right? So what is happening is that when you have a candidate who's contesting from multiple seats, he's actually being seen as a hedging mechanism, right? And then it prioritizes the leader, right? So it is giving priority to the leader and not to the people, right? That is something which is against the democratic principles. This undermines the democratic principles. Fifth, the one candidate multiple constituencies is sometimes used to enhance the reach and the delivery of the leader, relying on their popularity for the electoral success. So we are having the personality cult. We are following the charisma of a particular leader rather than the party as a whole, the objectives of the party as a whole. This often reflects the leader's dominance within the party, particularly in family or leader-centric. Moreover, this concept goes against the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression. We had a particular case of Supreme Court, that is Ashwani Kumar Upadhyay versus Union of India, where it was argued that when people elect a representative, they trust that person. Contesting multiple constituencies, winning them and vacating one seat for a by-election violates Article 19, Subclause 1, Subclause A of the Constitution. This practice causes voter confusion and discontent. These are the points you can effectively use in your answers, right? For example, as happened in Wayanad, Kerala, right? So what happened there was that Rahul Gandhi, once he basically fought the general elections, the overall participation was almost 72.92%. But in the by polls, the overall participation was just 64.2%. Now, what are some of the advantages of this concept? So see, this is common in many countries. Now, what you need to understand, you need to look at this particular concept from a practical view, right? So it gives a safety net to the candidates, right? Especially in tightly contested constituencies. Second, what happens is that in a polity such as India, where politics is mostly centered around the leader or the family, this concept smoothens the leader's continuation, right? For example, let's say, in case a leader-centric party secures a majority in the elections, but you have the leader of the party who loses out, then it would secure the smooth transition. For instance, what happened in West Bengal? So you had Mamata Banerjee, who lost in Nandigram seat in 21 West Bengal elections. To make way for her, another leader elected from the Bhabanipur constituencies had to resign from the assembly, right? So such instances follow. International experiences. So this concept is not unique to India. Pakistan and Bangladesh also allow the candidates to contest from multiple seats. Pakistan places no limit on the number of constituencies, and in the 2018 elections, we had the former Prime Minister who contested on 5 seats and vacated 4, right? Similarly, Bangladesh allowed the candidates to contest up to 5 constituencies until 2008, but now limits it to 3. Now, this practice was once common in UK, but it has been banned since 1983. Most European countries now understand why they have banned this, because they are evolved democracies, right? So therefore, they have banned this practice to promote representation and accountability. Now, the misuse of this system it far outweighs the benefits. There have been demands for reforms, and the possible solutions can be that we can amend Section 33, Subclause 7 of the Representation of People's Act of 1951 to ban a candidate contesting from multiple constituencies. The Election Commission of India in 2004, it also recommended that the government ban this particular practice. The Law Commission in its 255th report made the same recommendation, right? Second, what we can do is we can recover the full cost of by-election from the candidate vacating a seat, right? Now, this can basically serve to discourage candidates from contesting the election simultaneously, contesting from many positions, many constituencies. The Election Commission of India recommended cost imposition on the candidates. A more effective way can be that we can basically hold the by-elections after a year and voters get the ample time to make informed decisions so that they're not biased in favor of the ruling party, right? So that the opposition can also, the candidate who lost can prepare strategically and a more balanced and fair process can take place. This could be done by amending section 151A of the RPA Act, and this provides for by-election within 6 months. Now, holding election requires substantial financial resources. Furthermore, with elections being round-the-year affair in India, the frequent need of by-elections takes time and money, and therefore the development compromises. Issue of one candidate, one constituency is political. It requires political willpower. And again, what we are trying to say is that one person, one vote is the core of democracy. If we feel that one person, one vote is the core of the democracy, we also need to focus upon this fact that it's time to enforce one candidate, one constituencies for the candidates. This is the overall objective of the article. Now, we have a very important act, and that is Representation of People's Act. So we have got Representation of People's Act 1950. Which primarily focuses upon maintaining the electoral rolls. Then we have got more important Representation of People's Act of 1951. Now this act, it focuses upon the procedure with respect to the elections to the Parliament, State Legislature, Office of the President and Vice President. It gives the whole procedure, key piece of legislation in India that governs the conduct of elections, right? Now, it basically complements the RPA 1950, which is basically focused upon preparation of electoral rolls. What are the basically key provisions of RPA 1951? Composition and qualification of members. Now, it specifies the qualification for the candidates contesting for various elections, right? Then a candidate must meet the age and other criteria. Election conduct. Now, this governs the whole process of the election, scrutiny, withdrawal of candidature, declaration of result. Make sure that the whole process is free and fair, right? Which ensures the transparency. Next is election offences. So we have certain practices which, if followed by a candidate, can make him liable to disqualification, right? For example, bribery, undue influence, or intimidation, involving oneself in anti-social activities like dowry or something like that. Now, then it also focuses upon disqualification of members. So corrupt practices, electoral offense. Then, if a person is convicted for an offense which is punishable with imprisonment of 2 years or more, then this can act as, then that person can be liable for disqualification, right? Next, election disputes. There is a particular provision with respect to election disputes also. So it allows for the filing of the election petitions. It designates the high courts as the authority to adjudicate the election disputes. Then it also talks about the representation. We already have reservation for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, but it tries to specify the process with respect to that. Model Code of Conduct and Election Commission rules. So it gives adequate. Election Commission of India is basically a constitutional body. It has plenary power with respect to the conduct and superintendence of election, but this particular act, it tries to streamlines that, right? So it empowers the ECI to oversee the elections, and then with respect to that, the Election Commission of India basically comes out with the Model Code of Conduct. Then the election expenditure. So we have got the expenditure which has to be given by the candidates. They have to tell that how much of the expenditure has been incurred in the whole process within a specified time, right? So this sets limits on basically the overall campaign. So that is it, what you need to know with respect to this particular article. Coming to the next article, this is with respect to the technology facilitated gender-based violence. So we have a particular basically program by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. Now it has basically come up with a particular program that is Ab Koi Bahana Nahi. Now basically what we are trying to say in this article, the gist is that though the government is investing and making a lot of policies with respect to this overall cybersecurity domain, and making sure that the women especially are protected with respect to the crimes which are committed against them. But still what we see is that there is a rise of the events with respect to the cybersecurity, the online harassment, right? Cyberbullying. So over there, we need to focus, and therefore this article has come up with some of the recommendations also. So India stands as pivotal point. Now it gives some number that it says that we have 1.11 billion mobile connections, 700 million internet users, and 600 million smartphones. While the digital gender divide is basically it's narrowing. Again, there is the prevalence. There are the instances of gender-based violence, particularly tech facilitated. That is with the help of the technology, we have these gender-based violence which are being committed, right? Ministry of Women and Child Development have come up with this particular policy, that is the Ab Koi Bahana Nahi, a national campaign aligned with global 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Now, India's digital transformation has unlocked immense opportunities for empowerment. So we also have the Jan Dhan Yojana, which since 2015 basically has covered a lot of accounts, has made there has been the total number of accounts coverage has almost increased 4 times. Women holding 55.6% of the accounts. Then we have got digital Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile linkages, ensuring and enabling the digital benefits and cashless transactions. However, this increased connectivity has exposed women to new risks. So we have in urban areas online harassment targeting women, especially in the public facing roles, for example, journalism or politicians. Rural India boasts 20% more internet users than urban areas. Now then, again, in the rural society, what we basically see is that it is constrained by social norms. Women and girls lack the digital literacy to navigate the online spaces effectively. So we are trying to focus upon enhancing the digital skills. So once this issue is compound, many women are also unaware of their rights, right? Of the mechanisms available in order to report those abuse. So we have this particular tech facilitated gender-based violence takes many harmful forms, include persistent harassment, cyber stalking, online trolling, and others. Then we have for example, we have fake profiles, voyeurism, grooming, and other things, right? Other crimes which are committed against the women. These often force women and girls to retreat from digital space, and that is something which is not good. India has taken important steps to combat this. So we have legal protections in the form of Information Technology Act. We have got the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita of 2024. Then these are the statutory mechanisms. Then we also have National Cybercrime Reporting Portal. Now you need to tell me under which ministry the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal comes. Now please understand, in this particular article, it is just giving you an information. It is not something which is to be analyzed, right? So these additional points can be used in your answers, and also they can be very important for your prelims. Now again, Information Security Education Awareness Program spreads digital safety awareness. Women-specific programs such as Digital Shakti, launched by a National Commission for Women. Do read about it. Equip women with tools to navigate the online spaces effectively. Then we have got international negotiations and agreements. So we had the 67th session of the Commission for the Status of Women. So we basically, in this particular agreement, India signed off an agreed conclusion that called for adequate safeguards in order to promote an open, secure, stable, accessible, and affordable information and communication technology environment for all women and girls. The way forward should be that there has to be a truly safe digital environment, now which basically requires more focus and strategic efforts to keep pace with the changing and evolving digital world. So we have the Global Digital Compact adopted by the world leaders, including India, at the United Nations Summit for the Future. This strengthens the legal and policy frameworks to counter and eliminate all forms of violence, including the sexual and gender-based violence. Again, which can basically occur through the use of technology. So combating the tech-facilitated gender-based violence must be a top priority. It includes enforcing stricter laws against perpetrators, swifter justice, holding social media platforms accountable. Now, this is important. So the social media platforms are also basically, they also have a duty to make sure that these sort of crimes do not take place. Next, we need to focus upon expanding the digital literacy. That is important. And we need to basically promote safe online practices. School curriculums should include that. Then nationwide campaigns should also be there so as to foster respect and inclusive digital spaces. Collaboration could be there with the tech industry. So tech industry is also as important as the other stakeholders, right? Leveraging AI to detect and remove the abusive content is important, alongside introducing user-friendly reporting mechanisms. Just as important is the development of robust survivor support system, so that we can see, again, if someone has already suffered, we need to basically have proper mechanisms to rehabilitate and reintegrate that person in the society. Accessible counseling, legal aid, and rehabilitation services. Capacity of the helplines. For example, we have got a Tech Saki, a helpline offering accurate information, empathetic support, and assistance will ensure that survivors receive timely and effective assistance. India's timely message is unequivocal, that is Ab Koi Bahana Nahi. Ensuring women's safety is not only a moral obligation, but also a critical pillar for India's progress. Governments, tech companies, civil society groups, individuals, and international organizations all need to come on board and make sure that they basically make the overall environment safe for the women. Now, Let's study about UN Women. So again, it can be asked in the prelims. So UN Women is a United Nations entity for gender equality and empowerment of women, established in July 2010 by the UNGA to accelerate the progress on the gender-related issues, especially the gender equality. It merges 4 previously distinct bodies. Now, mandate is to support the member states with respect to making sure that there is proper gender equality in the society, then coordinate the United Nations effort, implement with different governments and civil society organization so as to foster gender equality. Now, what are the key focus areas? So, ending violence against women. So, that is one of the foremost objectives to combat the gender-based violence. Then, economic empowerment, promote equal pay, political participation, encourage the participation of women in the politics, education and skill development, then humanitarian actions. So, again, these are the areas where you have the focus of this particular body. Then major initiatives. So it has come up with He for She campaign, a global solidarity movement engaging men and boys to promote gender equality. Unite campaign aimed at ending violence against women. Women Count enhances the collection and use of gender data for informed policy decisions. Gender digital innovations promotes women's access to digital tools and technologies, reducing the digital divide. So this is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. That is it. So coming to the next article, this is with respect to the carbon market. Now again, the gist of the article is that we recently had the COP29 summit. Now, in this particular summit, what we had is that there was the emphasis on the carbon markets. Now, in this article, we'll discuss what carbon market means, how it has facilitated and achieved the objective of climate mitigation and adaptation, right? Reducing the overall emissions, and what are the issues with respect to the overall functioning of the carbon markets, and what are the possible suggestions. That is what is given in this particular article, right? A very simplified article. So we had the COP29 ongoing climate conference in Azerbaijan that has given a fillip to the idea of using carbon markets to curb the carbon emissions by approving standards that can help in setting up of international carbon market. Now, what is carbon market? It allows the buying and selling of the right to emit carbon in the atmosphere. Therefore, it limits the amount of carbon emitted. And again, it can issue certificates called carbon credits that allow the holder of the certificate to emit certain amount of carbon into the atmosphere. If someone has a carbon credit certificate with it, that person is entitled to basically emit that much amount of carbon in the atmosphere. One carbon credit is equivalent to 1000 kilograms of carbon dioxide. By limiting the number of carbon credits that are issued, the governments can control how much carbon is released, right? So basically, government can be, they can be in that situation where they determine that how much of the carbon would be emitted in the overall atmosphere. Anyone who doesn't hold the carbon credits by their name would not be allowed to emit any carbon. Carbon credits were first used in the 1990s in the US, right? And which were introduced as cap and trade model, and that were basically for the sulfur dioxide emissions. That is it. Individuals and firms that hold carbon credits but don't actually need them for any reasons can sell their credits to the interested buyers. So if someone has a requirement of more, that if someone is emitting more, that person can basically buy from someone who is not utilizing his carbon credits, right? So that is a kind of market which develops. The price at which these carbon credits are traded is determined by the market forces of supply and demand. Then a carbon market can also include trading of carbon offsets, right? In this case, a business that pollutes the environment, for example, can purchase carbon offsets sold by environmental NGO that promises to plant trees that suck a certain amount of carbon emissions, right? So through this, what can happen is if a particular enterprise is emitting more carbon, then that can be offset by basically planting more trees, right? So that is a kind of mechanism which is also provided. What is good about the carbon markets? Pollution of the environment and the climate change caused by carbon emission is a classic case of what economists call as externality, right? What is externality? Externality is caused when the cost of economic activity is not properly accounted for, right? So it can be positive externality also and negative externality also due to the absence of well-defined property rights, right? For example, the example is a business uses a raw material such as iron will have to pay for the supplier who owns the iron to be able to procure and use it, thus incurring a certain cost. But when the same firm emits carbon, it usually doesn't have to pay any money, right? So this is the kind of externality which is there. Therefore, firms are generally able to emit their waste into the atmosphere for free, and this leads to unhindered pollution. Firms in this case have no financial incentives to curb their carbon emissions. Carbon markets in which the right to pollute is traded, it imposes a certain cost on the firms. So basically, you are imposing cost on that particular pollution, which is basically done by these enterprises. The intersection of standardized accounting frameworks and technological advancement has led to improved ability of corporations to monitor and report their carbon emissions. While this is difficult for the vast majority of the small businesses, in the developing world, particularly in capturing the supply chain emissions, the ongoing developments like the real-time data tracking of the energy sector continue to enhance the specificity of the data. Again, what the article is trying to say is that with the technology, we have come up with those mechanisms, those standardized data formats through which we can measure the amount of emissions which are being made by different enterprises, right? However, corporations have preferred a voluntary mechanism, right? They don't want the state to basically guide them. Carbon disclosure projects, for example, they have been reluctant to the government participation, government intervention. Such budgeting, what they think is that such budgeting may lead to output restrictions. Now, this is but obvious. If the government is limiting the carbon credits, obviously it would lead to lower production, and then it would lead to the overall economy, which would not basically more productive, right? It would not give that much amount of returns. They also point to varied production processes that might have diverse supply chain and make it difficult for the optimal carbon budget. Large multinational corporations such as the ExxonMobil and the General Motors have advocated for carbon markets that allows free trading of carbon credits among the prices at price determined by the market forces. So they are basically saying that we should be allowed. It should be a free mechanism. The government should not interfere, right? It should be based on the supply and demand of these carbon credits. It helps to allocate carbon credits more efficiently. So what can go wrong? So again, when there is a functioning of carbon market, a government that is not very keen on reducing the emissions, it may increase the supply of carbon credits. See, if a government is not willing to basically work upon the climate change aspects, it can increase the number of carbon credits in the market, and therefore it would lead to more emissions, right? That scenario can follow. Others, what they feel is that if the government is keeping a strict cap on the overall emissions, if it is trying to restrict the carbon market, obviously it would lead to lower economic activity, and ultimately it would have lower economic returns. So then that can also allow the firms to cheat by allowing them to illegally emit carbon. The success of the carbon offsets also depend upon the degree of personal incentives that firm owners possess to care about the emissions, carbon emissions, which may often be very little. Critics claim that the firms that purchase carbon offsets do it for the sake of virtue signaling, and they may have little incentive to ensure that the investments in these instruments are actually helping offset the carbon. Again, what they're saying is that they're not doing for a real purpose. They're just doing for the sake of just showing for the accounting processes. Meanwhile, other critics have raised more fundamental questions regarding how exactly a government would be able to arrive at the optimum supply of the carbon credits. They argue that the politicians who do not incur any personal economic cost when they legislate the economic reductions may restrict the supply of carbon credits more than what is really necessary, leading to slower economic growth. So you have arguments on the both sides. One argument is that the government can basically oversupply the carbon credits, and then it will lead to more emissions. The other argument is that government can basically restrict it, and then that will lead to lowering of the overall economic growth. So therefore, if we are basically thinking to implement the carbon market scenario internationally, there needs to be robust mechanisms in place. There has to be very clear guidelines so that the government also do not interfere in the market, and also the private sector, it's not just running it should not run for the profit's sake, but also it should incorporate the climate aspect in its overall functioning with the help of the carbon market mechanism. That is it, what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the last article of the day, this is with respect to the country of Moldova. So again, why this becomes important is because there have been many instances where UPSC has asked questions with respect to those geographical places which have been featured in the news, right? So this becomes important. So India has expressed the appreciation for the support that Moldova extended in airlifting the stranded Indians who had been evacuated when the war in the Ukraine broke out in February 2022. Moldova extended crucial help during the Operation Ganga. Important. That was for the evacuation of stranded Indians from Ukraine. To evacuate the very large number of stranded Indian students during the Ukraine crisis, Operation Ganga was started to airlift Indian students and professionals who were based in Ukraine. At least 20,000 Indian citizens in the Ukraine were evacuated with the help of neighboring countries like Poland, Romania, Slovenia, and Moldova and Hungary. India would also open an embassy in Moldova, not so distant future. located in a strategically important eastern part of Europe, right? So this article itself emphasizes upon the importance of Moldova. We look at the map, right? Despite geographical distance and different traditions, Moldova and India have always maintained a bond of mutual respect and understanding. Now this becomes important, that is the mapping. Now you can just see that you have Russia here, then you have the country of Ukraine, right? And over here you have this particular country of Moldova, right? So we have the adjoining country as Romania, and then you have got Ukraine here. Over here you have got the Black Sea, right? And over here you have got the Sea of Azov. So if you just see, we have a very important strait here. Can you just tell me and write in the comment section that which is this strait which separates the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea? Then over here we have got the Bosphorus Sea, then we have got the Sea of Marmara, right? Over here, this is the Sea of Marmara, right? And then over here we have got the Aegean Sea, and this portion is the Dardanelles Strait, right? So this is the, basically this part is the European part of Turkey, right? So this is the kind of mapping which is important, and there can be a possible question. So here we come at the end of the session. I hope you really enjoyed the session. Do let us know through your likes and comments. Thank you. All the best.